All right, you've been watching the briefing by Pentagon Press Secretary there, John Kirby, alongside Major General William Hank Taylor from the Joint Staff regarding the situation in Afghanistan right now. Pentagon officials saying that 21,600 people have now been evacuated from Afghanistan over the past 24 hours. I want to bring in our Louis Martinez, producer there at the Pentagon, alongside Rick Klein, our political director, just to talk about where we stand right now, both politically and militarily. Louis, I think one of the things we have been following on a regular basis is the amount of people and the efforts being brought forth to get both Afghan refugees out of that country, along with all U.S. military personnel, civilian workers. What's the latest update? What's the biggest takeaway, I guess we should say, that you got from that briefing thus far?
Kira, the biggest takeaway for me was that the commitment remains by the Pentagon that they're going to do everything they can to bring out any American citizen, any Afghan person at risk who wants to leave Afghanistan. But the big qualifier is that they have to do it by August 31st. This is President Biden's self-imposed deadline that he issued back in July for when he wanted all the 2,500 troops that he was pulling out. This was before this massive evacuation that has seen the influx of 6,000 troops. But now you have time. The question is there enough time to get everybody out who needs to get out and wants to get out? You heard a lot of questions there from my colleagues talking about, has a decision been made? Are you conferring with the Taliban, telling them that you're going to get out by August 31st? Can you get out all of these troops that you've flown in by August 31st, and can you do it safely? The question is, what happens to those people that can't get out by August 31st? And then just follow-ons about the questions about the Taliban, what is going to happen on August 31st? While this briefing was taking place, there was another briefing taking place inside Kabul. The Taliban's top spokesman there, once again holding an incredible news conference, because of the mere thought of a Taliban spokesman in Kabul doing that is just was mind-blowing, given what happened just a week ago. But again, this spokesman saying that they have cut off all access to the airport and that they want to see American troops out by August 31st. Now, the message to the Afghan population from this spokesman is essentially, stay here in Afghanistan. We will ensure your security. Don't go to the airport. Now, that is going to create a significant problem here for the United States, because if they're stopping the flow of people getting to the airport, Afghans specifically, who the United States is committed to get out, what happens next? Because the U.S. says we're going to continue with our mission to try to get them out, but if nobody shows up, because the Taliban is now blocking their way, that's a significant development.
The Taliban saying, let's live together, the war has finished. But clearly, this is not the type of situation where you can say, okay, the war is over, let's live in peace and all get along. I mean, the ramifications here are huge for the future of that country, in addition to the lives of thousands of people that haven't been able to get out of the country.
No, that's still going on. We know that there are people outside of Kabul who are trying to get into the city. We know that the United States government honestly doesn't know how many Americans there are. You heard John Kirby say you don't have to register. You're not required to when you go to a foreign country. So we don't honestly know. So these estimates of 10,000 to 15,000, they are just estimates because they really don't know. What you heard Kirby talk about, maybe how many Americans have gotten out. He refuses to disclose the number. Maybe several thousand is as far as he's going to go. But we have confirmed that the number is probably higher than 4,000. But what about all those tens of thousands of Afghans who want to go? Those pictures continue, Kira. We're continuing to see those crowds of people gathered, as you see on your screen right now, these people gathered outside of the airport trying to get in. There are some desperate pictures of people clutching the very paperwork that would allow them in, who are not being allowed in because, let's say, there are not enough consular officials to let them in. So this is a growing situation, and it's going to continue. But now with this deadline of August 31st, and it's going to be interesting to see what President Biden will do. He has indicated he might be flexible on that date, but we're seeing the Taliban be firm, no on August 31st. What happens next?
All right, so that's the humanitarian side of things here. Rick, let's talk about the political ramifications as we look at those pictures and we see the thousands of people there and we're hearing about the conditions there at the airport and outside of the airport. You know, we had a president that said this was going to be an orderly and safe evacuation. That's not what the pictures tell us at this point. So what's at stake here with regard to President Biden and basically his street cred right now when it comes to foreign policy?
Yeah, Kira, this has been a disastrous week for the Biden administration in terms of their policy. To see the images, to see the events play out exactly the way that he thought and said that they wouldn't is a nightmare scenario for him. We've heard from many Democrats on Capitol Hill who are extremely critical of the way this has been handled. And even in the past week, when you've seen President Biden try to get ahead of it and try to explain his decision making, I think the news conferences that he's given seem to go just fine in terms of him explaining it. But then events seem to overtake it. And now the coming clash between the Taliban and they're holding firm to a deadline that may not even be feasible. We're going to hear more from President Biden today. We know he's talking to G7 leaders as well, who would like to see maybe a little more flexibility around that self-imposed deadline. We've seen a lot of criticism flow in from European allies and others. But make no mistake, this is a high-stakes moment. Joe Biden has put the credibility of his presidency on the line in bringing this together, and has been banking on the ability or the readiness of the public to buy into the idea that it's time to wind down this conflict in Afghanistan, that this would have happened at any time, that he doesn't want to pass it on to another president. It's not a bad argument necessarily. It's something that the public has broadly accepted. It's actually something President Trump espoused himself in saying he didn't want to hand this off and wanted to finally end this. But the pictures and the events are challenging him in a very real way. And even as we look back at potential intelligence failures or shortcomings that led to this, the logistical task at hand, as Louis outlined over the next week, not even knowing how many Americans you have to evacuate, how can you possibly then say that you're going to give safe harbor or safe passage to anyone who wants or needs it? It really is an impossibility. It is bound to have shortcomings. Even aside from the pictures last week, a very real and very challenging security situation that puts on the line the credibility of the American president.
Quickly, maybe each of you, as we wrap this up, could give me your thoughts about, as we head into G7 and we are going to see Biden there on the world stage. No doubt Afghanistan will be a huge conversation among all the world leaders. But would you both agree that right now this is a tremendous test for Biden as we watch what's happening in Afghanistan, on whether terrorist groups are going to be able to reconstitute and possibly start attacking Americans, not only overseas, but here in the United States? I mean, that's really a tremendous fear as we watch everything go down there in Afghanistan. There are long-term fears that what could happen within that country, knowing from what we know in the past, right, when the Taliban previously embraced al-Qaeda, and we saw how that turned out, the future of what this means for safety across the globe and here in the United States. Nobody wants to see another 9/11. Rick, quick thoughts, and Louis, I'd love to hear from you too.
Yeah, as we come up on the 20th anniversary of September 11, 2001, it is a very real challenge. And I think that's why it will matter to most Americans. It isn't about some abstract notion about whether a nation has been rebuilt or not. It's about your own safety, your own security, the quality and the necessities of the sacrifice, and making sure that it was worthwhile. And if the U.S. isn't safe from terrorism, then I think most people would agree that the sacrifice hasn't been what was warranted for the moment. And I think that is the challenge now that has been set up by President Biden, setting into motion this sequence of events to wind down the U.S. troop presence there.
Well put. Louis, final thought?
Very quickly, I think that, yes, terrorism and terrorist safe havens are on the minds, not only here in the United States at the Pentagon, but internationally as well, because this is a concern. Yes, there is the acknowledgement that al-Qaeda is no longer what it used to be, but ISIS remains a threat, and this could be a terrorist haven for new groups that could pose threats to the United States. And while President Biden has said that he has been receiving consultations and he has consulted America's partners in the West, there has been some criticism that maybe not enough, that maybe this was the president doing this, just trying to get lip service from Western European nations and other countries to go along with what the United States was planning to do. Because, in other words, if the U.S. left Afghanistan, NATO was going to have to leave as well. And so there's been a perception that maybe this was a decision that was forced on them. But they're going to have to also deal with the same scenarios of what happens next.
ABC News Political Director Rick Klein, also ABC News Senior Pentagon Reporter, Producer Louis Martinez, live from Washington. Thank you both so much.
Thanks.
We'll be right back.
Thank you, Kara.
And welcome back. You're watching ABC News Live. A few other headlines making news this morning. New York has a new governor. Former Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul was sworn into office just after midnight last night, taking over after former Governor Andrew Cuomo's resignation and making history as the state's first female governor. The governor spoke today at a ceremonial swearing in, saying she wants people to believe in their government again. She's vowed to take on the toxic culture and faces several challenges, including the pandemic, the state's economic recovery, gun violence, and the new recreational marijuana rules. An aide to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she's telling members they're close to landing the plane on the bipartisan infrastructure package and the Democrats' $3.5 trillion budget resolution after a group of moderate Democrats blocked a key procedural vote. That group demanding the House pass the bipartisan deal before moving forward on the larger bill. With such a narrow majority in the House, Democrats need every vote they can get. And the latest details on that big news for science. Pfizer's COVID vaccine has become the first to get full approval from the FDA for Americans 16 years and up. Nearly 205 million doses of Pfizer's vaccine have gone to Americans so far, and the hope now that this full FDA approval will convince even more people to get vaccinated. Eva Pilgrim has the latest.
This morning, major new developments in the fight against COVID-19. The FDA granting full approval for Pfizer's vaccine, the fastest vaccine approval in FDA history.
Those who've been waiting for full approval should go get your shot now.
Pfizer becoming the first vaccine to move past emergency use authorization. Their shot, made with mRNA, does not contain any part of the coronavirus and does not alter people's DNA. In order to get full FDA approval, Pfizer had to undergo a more stringent review, submitting results from its ongoing clinical trials and proving substantial evidence of effectiveness.
The FDA not just took their time and did the due diligence that needed to be done, but did it quickly and efficiently.
The move paves the way for more corporations, government, and schools to issue vaccine mandates. The Pentagon now preparing to require the shot for its 1.3 million active duty troops. New York City announcing shots will now be required for all school employees, with weekly testing no longer an option. And workers at United Airlines have 5 weeks to show the now required proof of vaccination. While the FDA's full approval of the Pfizer vaccine applies to those 16 and older, the agency making it clear that does not mean it should be given off-label to younger children.
They are not just small adults. So we really would have to have the data and the appropriate dose before recommending that children be vaccinated.
But this first full approval could be a game changer for those who have been hesitant to get a shot. A recent poll finding that 3 in 10 of those unvaccinated would be more likely to get it now. And with every state in the country now experiencing high community transmission except Vermont and Maine, more Americans are dying of COVID. Now, an average of 738 every day. Florida just saw its deadliest week. Healthcare workers hoping people will get the vaccine as they face a crush of COVID patients.
One of my biggest frustrations is that we're maybe not vaccinating our kids at a rate that is beneficial to everyone.
So what about those other vaccines? Full approval for Moderna and Johnson & Johnson is expected in the coming months. Kira?
All right, Eva Pilgrim at Pfizer headquarters there in New York. Thank you so much. Well, New York City is requiring all teachers and staffers now to get the COVID-19 vaccine as the schools start to prepare for classes next month. Mayor Bill de Blasio announced yesterday that all staff members must have at least 1 dose by September 27th. I'd like to bring in New York City Schools Chancellor Misha Porter for more on this. Chancellor Porter, thank you so much for being with us. It's a big day.
It is a big day. Thanks for having me.
All right, well, let's talk about what factors went into this decision and why you feel this requirement is so important for all staffers now to be vaccinated.
Well, I think the most important factor is our children, right? The most important learning that's going to happen is going to happen between teachers and students in our buildings, in our classrooms. And, you know, the FDA authorization only made our case even stronger to require that all of the adults be vaccinated so we can wrap a bubble of safety around our children.
So, Chancellor, what do you say to those teachers who disagree with this vaccine mandate and don't feel that they should be required to get the shot?
You know, this is a moment that's about us protecting our community, us protecting our neighborhoods, but also us protecting our schools. And so that's what I say that to everyone who is concerned about the vaccine, but particularly our teachers who've done so much hard work throughout the pandemic, teaching remotely, teaching in person. This is the additional extra layer of protection that we didn't have a year ago. And so let's use every tool. That's what teachers do. We use every tool in our toolkit to teach students, and this is a new one.
Well, you may remember, Chancellor, there were a lot of teachers that didn't want to go back into the classroom, right? There were a lot of different fears out there. So for these teachers who don't want to follow the mandate, what will happen to them? I mean, give me the blunt reality here. Will they be out of a job? And are you prepared for the possible backlash?
I expect that many, if not all of our teachers are going to comply. We're working with our union partners to bargain, around what the potential consequences will be for folks who don't get vaccinated. But I've heard a lot of positive feedback from teachers around this. Teachers have already been going to get vaccinated. The UFT has shown that many of their members are already vaccinated. And so I think this is something we're doing together. And for those people who still have concerns, I think the FDA cleared the way to alleviate some of those concerns.
But if they don't do it, will they be in your classrooms?
September 27th is the date that all DOE faculty members must have their first dose. More information to come.
All right. Well, while teachers will be required to get the vaccine, of course, children under 12 still are not eligible. How are you going to protect everyone within that? And with this highly contagious Delta variant, will there still be testing, and what will that involve?
Yep. And so, again, I'm going to lean in. Our first level of protection is going to be getting all the adults vaccinated. We will still have masks in schools. We will have testing for our students. And so New York City has done a phenomenal job of being the gold standard for health and safety throughout this pandemic. We're going to continue to work with our partners at DOH and MH, our doctors, to make sure that everything we do, that we layer on all of the additional mitigating strategies in our elementary school classrooms where students are under 12 and not eligible to be vaccinated, and across our school system as well.
All right. And by the way, I love your mantra, lean in. As you know, and I know, New York City classrooms, they can be small, and it's hard to socially distance, right? So how are you going to deal with your crowded city schools and the health threat?
I want to just give a great shout out to our principals and our superintendents. Our superintendents are working one-to-one with each and every school to develop a plan to get to 3 feet. And, if there is a room that's an issue, we'll either take it offline or we will work to add additional layers of health and safety into that classroom. This is New York City, but we can do this. We can get this done like no other city can.
New York City Schools Chancellor Misha Porter, we will follow up in September to see how it's going. Thanks so much, Chancellor.
Thank you so much.
That does it for this newscast. I'm Kira Phillips in for Diane Macedo today. Thanks so much for joining us. And remember, ABC News Live is here for you all day with the latest news, context, and analysis. A programming note, by the way, President Biden is set to deliver remarks on Afghanistan this afternoon. We'll bring that to you live when it happens. And I'll see you back here at 3 p.m. Eastern with Terry Moran for the breakdown. Continue to have a wonderful day.
There was another shooting in this country which stunned the nation and much of the world when John Lennon was shot late last year in New York City. Today, Mark David Chapman, who confessed to that killing, was sentenced to 20 years in life, or 20 years to life in prison. Rita Sands has that story.
Loyal Lennon fans and reporters lined up for security checks as they came to witness final pleas by the defense and prosecution, who would argue to the end about what the sentence should be for Lennon's killer. Inside the courtroom, 26-year-old Mark David Chapman sat impassively and well protected by a hidden bulletproof vest. Defense lawyer Jonathan Marks had one last chance to argue for the 15-year minimum sentence, and did so by portraying his client as a man more in need of psychiatric care than imprisonment.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.